listening to, a higher power. I remember when I was in patrol and I'd get scared and be hunched behind a car or whatever. Because I was so small, they would hoist me through the windows at the, a warehouse or whatever, because I was tiny. So I get, in there to start the search or whatever. And I mean, you're scared out of your mind. You can't see anything, whatever. And I would always say, this was a Bible verse that I would say all the time. And Joshua 9 was my Bible verse. But be strong and of a good courage. Be not afraid, for Lord thy God is with thee. Wherever I go, I'd say that over and over and over again.
Can you introduce yourself for me, please?
My name is Susan Coniglio. Prior to getting married, it was Susan Higgins when I was in the Sheriff's Department.
Okay. And Susan, who did you work for?
LA County Sheriffs.
LA County Sheriffs. How long?
16 years.
16 years. Okay. I always start off this way. Can you give me a little bit of background about your family life, growing up, and ultimately, was there something that happened that led you to law enforcement?
Well, I was born on the East Coast and lived there till I was like 3 years old. And then my parents divorced, and my mother and my stepfather moved us to the West Coast, to California. And at that time, I had two older siblings, both girls, and it was, a different kind of childhood, I should say.
Well, without
challenging.
Yeah, so without going into too much, but we've chatted about this before. Essentially, you're pretty young, but you're brought to the West Coast. Not necessarily. Well, let me ask you this: did your dad know that you were being brought to the West Coast?
No, my biological father did not know that we were being taken to the West Coast. So that was something that my stepfather was the influence on my mom to take us over to the West Coast.
Okay.
So my family on the East Coast, my grandfather wasn't too happy about that. Italian man. Looking for his grandchildren. So we'll just leave it at that. But we were brought to a remote area, which was a kind of like a cult kind of environment. We were religious. I won't say what religion because I don't want to say anything bad about any particular religion. But we were planning for the end of the world. It was like Little House on the Prairie. School was in a one-room schoolhouse, and yeah.
Okay.
It was interesting.
So
young childhood.
One-room schoolhouse. How long did you go to that school?
Well, I remember because I was really young.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like 3 when we left the East Coast. And I remember getting put into, I believe, the first grade because they were counting kindergarten when we moved to the city when we left there.
Okay.
So we were there for like a year and a half, maybe. And I remember getting put in a public school when we moved to a city that was, not out in the middle of nowhere. And I didn't know anything. I knew how to color, but I didn't know, and I knew where babies came from because we watched a live birth. I remember that. I'll never forget that. I was like 4 years old and I'm watching a baby being born in the middle of the classroom. I'm like, almost makes you not want to ever have children.
So was it turmoil growing up for you then?
It was, you don't know that it's turmoil when you're going through it. You just think it's, life. And I knew it was a little different just from what I had heard, especially when we moved to the city.
Mm-hmm.
But, we grew all our own food. We were like planning for the end of the world. No jewelry, no makeup, no TV, all those things were evil. Yeah.
When you move to the city, though, does it get a little bit more normal?
A little bit, but there was controls. Those were control things that were continued on us by my stepfather.
Okay.
So I think he, told us we couldn't have sugar and stuff, so he could eat candy bars in the closet,
How was growing up for you, though? I mean, what kind of student were you?
I'm actually was surprisingly a pretty good student, though I didn't have much opportunity to go to school because I wanted to go to school. Um, but I had younger siblings, so when we moved to the city. So I had two older siblings, and then I had three younger siblings after my mom and my stepfather had more children, and so I was pretty much tasked with caring for them. I had to stay home a lot. So when I did make it to school, I like tried to absorb as much as I could. So I was like a B, maybe a C student, but a lot of it was because I was absentee. I was, playing mom at home so that my mom and my stepfather could, set up a booth at the fair, engrave or be professional photographers or whatever career was, the career of the time.
So it sounds like had you been allowed to go to school, you would have been a good student.
Yeah, I think I would.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so at some point, you end up in the foster system. Not very long, but you end up there. What happens? How do you end up in the foster system?
Well, I had my two other full sisters had both run away previous to me running away, and it got bad at home. I mean, it was not a good environment. We were poor, but that's not what made me run away. It was the abuse from my stepfather and just physical, emotional, every type of abuse you could imagine, and my older sister ran away, the one that was closest to me. She's 4 years older than me. So she ran away, and she was kind of like my rock.
Mm-hmm.
And once she ran away, I got injured on a motorbike, which I wasn't supposed to be on, even a motorbike or anywhere around where there were boys that had motorbikes or anything of that sort. And I fell, I hurt my leg. I drove into the back of a truck or whatever, and my stepfather wouldn't take us to the doctor, wouldn't take me to the doctor. And so my sister was so upset that that's when she ran away that night. And we got some antibiotics from the neighbor's house, and I don't know if I should go down this road.
Okay, that's fine. Okay. So, but eventually you end up running away yourself. You end up in the foster system, and then can you
I ran away from home because I was a gymnast as a kid. I loved gymnastics. I was going to be in the '84 Olympics for gymnastics. I drank, breathed, everything was gymnastics. I couldn't sit still. We couldn't afford gymnastics lessons, but my best friend at school, she went to gymnastics, and she would teach me every single thing that she learned. And I had a disorder with my hips. I had to have like braces on my legs when I was really little.
Mm-hmm.
And so my biological dad had built me like a balance beam to walk on. So, I started walking on it, and then I started doing somersaults on it, and then I started cartwheels on it. And before you knew it, I was pretty good at what I did. So I was excelling at gymnastics, and I was helping teach gymnastics even at a young age. I was like 9 or 10 years old, and the gym teacher would come pick me up, take me here to her gym, and I would help the little ones do the tumbling and stuff like that. And we had our first gymnastics meet, and I'm all excited. I got my leotard, even though, monies were really tight and stuff. And I'm supposed to go to my first meet, and time's ticking, and I'm like, I had already collected cans and gave my stepfather the money for the gas to take me to gymnastics meet. And he decides he's going to make me scrub the floor from head to toe. I'm in my leotard, and he's like, you need to clean the floor. And my mom finally stuck up for us and said, no, you told her you were going to take her, right? Now you're telling her she has to scrub the floor. She's in her brand new leotard. She's going to miss this. This was a big thing for me. And so I'll never forget. He goes, fine, I'll take you, but I hope you never come back. I never came back.
How old were you?
10, I think I was 10. Yeah, I ran away that night and I never came back. I called, there was like a rescue center or something up where we lived up in Northern California. My sister had been there. My other sister was already in foster care. And I remember thinking, I can't take this anymore. My older sister that I was really close to had already run away. I still had my three younger brothers and sisters that were at home though, which I felt terrible because I felt like I was kind of their, surrogate mother. But I knew I had to get out of the situation. It was just not healthy. And so that's when I ended up going into foster care, and they contacted my biological father and my stepmother, who were then living in Saudi Arabia.
Okay. So you end up there living with them for a while.
I end up moving to Saudi Arabia.
Okay. So skipping ahead a little bit, with all that turmoil, how do you end up in law enforcement? How do you get to that point?
Well, I've done a little bit of like racking my brain more recently about how I ended up there. And at first I thought it was just because, I wanted to be an attorney and I needed something to get me through law school. But then I was looking back, and between me and my siblings, I was always the meek one. I was the one that was, didn't have a backbone. My mom was kind of like that. My mom was like Mother Teresa. She, so lovable. She would do anything for you, but if you had to stick up for yourself, she wasn't your girl. And that was me. But I'd stick up for everybody else. Kids on the playground, if somebody picked on you because, you were overweight or you were an outcast, I was going to defend you. I didn't care, who I pissed off, because I just always wanted to make things right. I always wanted to protect everybody. And I was your girl, to do that. I didn't defend myself, though. I just defended other people. It's like that old adage, you can pick on your sibling, to death, whatever.
Yeah.
But the moment somebody else picks on them, you're like all over them, right? They can't do that. So I think part of that kind of led me down that road. And then going through the justice system, being told, I remember my older sister who had run away before me told me, okay, because they're going to try to put you back together again. Because this is the 80s, late 70s, early 80s. And the whole goal was just to keep the family unit. They didn't really care what was going on inside, family. They just wanted to, push you back together and brush you under the carpet. And so I remember my older sister telling me, because they were trying to put me back in the home. And I remember her practicing with me, like role playing, telling me, if they tell you, you just tell them you're going to run away again and again and again. And I'm like, I'll run away again and again. And she said, no, you need to say it with force. You need to say it with force. You need to stick up for yourself. Stop it. She's like making me practice what I'm going to tell the social worker when they come to visit me at the foster care, right? So I did. So that forced them. I became a ward of the court, and then that forced them to reach out to my biological father and my stepmother in Saudi Arabia. And I met my father one time since the time I was like 2. He came to town one time for my other sister's wedding, but I hadn't really met him. I just always would say when I was like in the 3rd grade, my daddy's in Saudi Arabia, and someday he's gonna come get me, and he's gonna take me over there to live, because people didn't know what was going on in the home, but I knew, and he was like my knight in shining armor. He was going to come take us away. So that's how I ended up in Saudi Arabia. They tracked down my dad, and I went over there to live with my dad, my stepmother, and my two of my half brother and my half sister, and then my stepsister were over in Saudi also.
But you have, getting back to why you got into law enforcement, it seems like you have this built-in innate ability. I don't even know if that's the right word. You just want to take care of other people. And is that essentially why you think you went into law enforcement?
I wanted to protect other people, other kids, especially children. Okay. I just had a heart for kids. I always thought I'd end up at child abuse. I always thought that's where my goal was. When I first hired the sheriff's department, I just wanted to work child abuse because I wanted to go get all those bad guys out there that were hurting kids And then move forward, I end up with an opportunity going to the job fair, but I just had my daughter. My daughter was like a year and a half old. And when I'm on the sheriff's department and I see this picture of this little baby and she looks just like my daughter. And mind you, we're in a public venue with all these different, it's a job fair, right? I saw that picture and I just identified so much of it with my daughter and my own childhood that I was like, I almost burst into tears in front of my partners. I was like, you know what? If I go there and I witness that, I mean, I witnessed enough in patrol as it was anyway.
Yeah.
But if I go there and I see that, I'm probably going to do something to somebody that, I'm probably going to be arrested for.
Let's talk about how you end up at LA County Sheriff's, though. Is it a shotgun approach? How do you end up specifically with that department?
I was working at a local hotel in the city of Industry, and I wanted to become an attorney. So I was in a paralegal program locally, and I thought I wanted to change the justice system as far as like protecting kids. I didn't know that, law enforcement was something that I really wanted to do. So, but I needed to make money because I was already living on my own when I was in high school after I moved back from the Midwest to the West Coast. I was finishing out my senior year of high school and I was living out here. So I needed to make money. And so I applied for the sheriff's department. I had a mentor at the hotel I worked at. He had been a deputy sheriff, and it was like, why don't you do this? You can make good money until you get pay for your law school and so on and so forth. So he was kind of a mentor, like a father figure mentor. And so he helped me to get on the sheriff's department. And I was just going to do it temporarily until I went back to school. But I really loved it. I mean, I got to do so many different things in the sheriff's department.
Yeah. So
units.
So let's talk a little bit about that. So you're 21 years old. You start in 1989,
Mm-hmm.
right? What's your first assignment? What are you doing first?
Well, I got sent to CJAC,
Okay.
Central Jail Arraignment Courts.
Okay.
And I'll never forget that day because we're in a group of young people and they're giving us our assignments. And it's like at Norwalk Court or something. And they're telling us, okay, well, who is going to get sent to CJAC? Oh man, I feel sorry for that person who's going to get sent to CJAC. And there's like 12 of us in there and they point to me. Just me. I'm getting sent to CJAC. And I have no law enforcement experience. I didn't know what a gun was. I mean, I knew what a gun was, but I thought they could just jump up off the table and shoot you randomly. I had no idea. And I'm getting sent to the most dangerous place there is, right? And I'm like,
why was CJAC supposed to be such a bad assignment?
I think they were just fucking with me. I mean, it was not a desirable place because it's like in the basement where the tunnels go down to Men's County Jail. So it's the arraignment courts where all of the new arrestees come in from IRC, which is where the buses drop them off, and they come down the tunnels and stuff. And oh my God, just the smells alone. I can still smell the smell. Like, but you're in a small quarters with a lot of dirty inmates, and I mean, it's a scary place for a 21-year-old, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they were fucking with me. Yeah. But I thought I was going to die. I remember getting on the phone with the guy I was dating at the time, just bawling my eyes out. And I had to go find my uniform. And I was so upset. I kept riding in circles trying to find the uniform shop because I was so distraught that I had to go to this hell the next day and report there at 8 o'clock in the morning or whatever it was. I can't remember. But yeah, that was my first assignment. And it ended up being not such a bad assignment. The deputies there, the senior there, everybody was like, kind of coaching me, though they would mess with me. They would give me the list of the inmates' names and they would change them. Sometimes, I can't even repeat some of the names. They would change their last name to something really naughty. They'd say, I need such and such, I don't know. You can imagine.
I got it.
Speak up. I'm going to tell you. And then I realized, like, the first time I'm like, I realized, like, what I'm saying. Like, the first couple, because they would sprinkle them in there in the list. Like, I'm telling you, you better speak up right now, you pussy, Mr. Willow, or whatever. And yeah, they got a kick out of it. But then they also tried to like help me. They made me, run sprints in the hallways downstairs to get ready for the academy, because this is prior to going into the academy.
Okay.
So, and they would give me spelling tests and things like that, like stuff that I needed for the academy.
Right.
So they were like mentors too. They were all good guys, and it was fine. They were just having a little bit of fun. Yeah.
Anybody push back on you at that time in terms of being a female, or everybody's pretty accepting at that point?
No, not really. If they did, I didn't notice.
Okay.
And I think that I just don't feel like I'm that susceptible to that.
Okay.
Not that people haven't said shitty stuff to me, or not that people haven't said, oh, well, she's only there because she, what. But if I'm around them long enough, they know, like, I'm a fucking hard worker. I fucking earn that shit. I'm not going to cower down to you thinking that. It's your own insecurities. And I belong where I belong because I worked hard to get there. And whether you want to believe that or not. And I'm not that thin-skinned that way. I'm just not. Because I usually am pretty quick-witted. I come back with shit that's much worse than what they said to me. And it's usually in a crowded environment where their other peers are around. So they're like, oh, not saying anything to her anymore, because she's going to come back with something that's going to make me look worse. So at that point, no.
Okay.
At that point, no. I don't remember pushback. I just remember, but most of the people that were working that assignment were seasoned. They were older people. Some of them were marshals, and then we took over. The sheriff's department took over the marshal's department and absorbed those officers. Some of them were already sheriffs, but yeah, I don't really remember. They had a little more fun with me, probably with the dirty names and stuff like that, but it was all.
So eventually you end up getting to the special transport unit. Is that after you do the academy? Are you done?
After the academy, most people go to Men's County Jail, or they work actually in the jails.
Mm-hmm.
I got sent to transportation. At that time, they were sending a few people. They sent a handful of deputies to transportation to transport inmates.
Do you think that was good or bad for you in the long run?
Well, I think it was good because I was in contact with the element, with inmates, people that did bad things. So I could identify and I could talk to them, but I wasn't locked in. I wasn't locked in the jail, because a lot of people that worked in the jail, it's like you're like in jail yourself. So I got to drive all over, the county, and I did Compton Court was my run. I did that. That was my normal run. So twice a night, PM shift, me and my partner would go to Compton and pick up inmates back and forth and stuff like that. Some of them were lifers, so you get to know them. And also sprinkled in with that, did some special trans and transporting, high profile people, and also funerals. I would get sent to funerals with inmates and my partner. My partner was Black. Obviously, I'm not Black. And we would get sent to, like, predominantly Black areas. And inevitably, I would get in trouble, because the female of that person who's deceased or whatever would think that there was something that I did. Why is she at this funeral?
Because you're white, or because you're an officer?
No, because I was white and I'm in plain clothes.
Oh, okay. You're in plain clothes. Okay.
You try to be as discreet as possible.
Sure.
Right? I mean, if the judge has said that this person can go to their loved one's funeral, then they're probably not in for anything that's too terrible.
Right.
And, we might have leg chains on them, but we get there early. We sit them in the front row. We sit behind them a couple rows. We keep an eye on them. But they're not like such an escape risk that we have to be like right on top of them. So they don't know who I am. The only savings was that my partner was Black too. So I kind of blended a little bit, but they wanted to know who that was at the funeral. And I was like,
interesting. Okay. So can you talk a little bit about how inexperienced you were as a driver, as you get those driving around big buses and doing all that?
Yeah, I my older sister, bless her heart, she taught me how to drive. I didn't learn to drive until I was like 18, just because I was overseas and so on and so forth. And I learned to drive in a stick shift, which was, very cumbersome, which came in handy at the, 10 speeds of transportation. But my sister would tell me, if you drive on the freeway, you will die, Susie. You're going to die if you drive on the freeway. I'm telling you, any of that stuff you see green looks like paint. It's not paint, it's blood. It just turns green. And, anything you see on the freeway is it's blood. So don't drive on the freeway. So I drove everywhere on side streets. Thank God for carpool for the academy, because otherwise I don't, I could have made it side streets, but it would take me a long time to get to the academy. So now I have to drive a bus, not just a bus, but a Crown bus. The Crown buses, the old Crown buses, they're 10 speed. You got to shift a bunch of times. You got to double clutch. And I'm all of 5 feet. I have like a 19-inch waist. I got all this stuff around me. I got a vest on. And I can't, and they have the air seat. So imagine you're trying to drive this bus, even just trying to learn. When I was on training, I used to come into transportation, and if my uniform would be black from here to here. My hands would be calloused and bleeding because I had to hold myself up. I had to stand up and drive the bus, double clutch, and then, God forbid, my ass would hit this air seat and we'd go on a bump. I would be projected to the ceiling. I'd have to put one hand up to stop myself. I know. They made fun of me like nobody's business. Yeah, Susie Ramichis, Yokohama Mama, they called me all kinds of stuff because and they'd be like, what are you doing? Deputy, are you working on the bus or are you driving the bus? Because you look like a mechanic with all that stuff on your uniform and whatever. So yeah, my sister did not do me any favors. I finally got used to it, and bless the heart of my training officer at TST, because, oh yeah, then we got to drive the MCIs, which was the automatics, which was a lot nicer.
Can you talk a little bit about, we discussed this, you're doing special transport and you're coming in contact with some famous people.
Mm-hmm.
Relay the story about OJ Simpson.
So my partner and I go to pick up OJ at the criminal courts building, and we walk in and he's standing there and he's like, oh no. And I guess at this particular time was when they were talking a lot about in the trial. And my ex-husband sat on the jurors for the trial too. And while I was working transportation, but I didn't watch it because you just didn't want to watch it. It's like you're living it. You don't watch it. You don't want to, And he's like, oh no. And I'm like, I asked him in a way, like, the F are you talking about? Oh, if they see you, because you're blonde and Caucasian and you're going to be, transporting me around, that they're going to talk about it. I'm like, nobody going to fucking talk about you. Nobody's going to talk about me transporting you. Shut the fuck up, right? And he's like, oh yeah. And I remember this was it was right before the Super Bowl. Everybody was trying to get information from OJ on who's going to win the Super Bowl that year, whatever. And he was talking about how he couldn't drink orange juice or something because it made his knees hurt or something. I don't remember. That's why they called him OJ. I don't know why they called him OJ. But so I think it was the second time I transported. I didn't transport him that much. I transported him maybe 2 or 3 times. And he's telling me, yeah, well, everybody that's, they're talking about this model from this magazine that I dated and how, this and that and stuff. And I'm like, okay, well, I don't give a shit. Like, shut the fuck up, And he goes, yeah, just think when I get out of jail, you can be my bodyguard and my girlfriend. And I'm like, yeah. I'm not going to repeat what I said back to him, but it wasn't, was not thrilled.
You and I discussed this beforehand, and I just kind of want to have you relate this story. But I think you treated people fairly on the bus, and I think you garnered their respect. talked about, letting him listen to, I don't know, hip hop music versus country music, stuff like that. But you also said, one of the most important things was you lose credibility when you don't follow through with things. So can you talk about that a little bit, expound on that a little bit about how you kind of treated these guys and what that ultimately a little bit of loyalty I think from those guys was developed with you just treating them right.
Well, I think that, I mean, I was going to say everybody deserves respect, but I'm not going to say that because I don't think that's true. Most people deserve respect, at least up front. You give them chances, you talk to them, but if they disrespect you and you continue to let them disrespect you, then you lose all credibility. And, physically, I'm still not that big of a person, but I'm bigger than I was then. Is if you tell them, if you continue to, let's say, smoke on the bus, because back then you could have cigarettes. And I was at the tail end of that when you could all smoke on the bus. I mean, if I ever get lung cancer, I know where I got it. But anyway, the whole bus would be full of smoke, and they weren't supposed to smoke on the bus. So if you told them, dude, stop smoking, I'm going to take all your cigarettes away or whatever. And you're going to get chained and you're going to get put in another part of the bus in the 10-man cage or in a single cage or whatever. When you get to court, you're going to get stuck over here, whatever punishment or alternative tool that you had to utilize that to your advantage, because sometimes that's the only way. If you get that one person under control, everybody else will follow, right? But if you tell them that you're going to do that, you better damn well be ready to back it up. So you better have good communications with your partners, especially if you're a smaller person like me. I'm not going to march into the 30-man section and whip somebody out and think I'm going to, I was a gymnast, so I had upper body strength, but I'm not that strong, and I'm not that stupid either. So you had to be prepared to follow through. So if you didn't follow through, you lose all credibility. And so some of the inmates on my normal run, to and from a particular court, they get to know that. They get to know that I was a person of my word. I would let them listen to the radio, the station that they wanted to listen to. I wouldn't torture them with my country music or whatever. And I wouldn't take the wheel of the bus and go like I used to do this on the freeways. So I would take, if you've ever driven a big vehicle like that, my husband won't let me drive our RV, but I don't know why, because maybe because I told him the story. But you take it like this and you go like that, and on its axle it goes like this, right? So they all think you're gonna like flip the bus or something. So they start like screaming and stuff, and I'm like, "You gonna keep doing that? I could just flip this thing. I don't give it, whatever, So certain things, there's certain ways that you can, find humor and stuff too. I tell them it's not a good time of the month for me right now. And I've got a 9mm on my waistband and, I'm just not feeling it right now. So you might want to stop doing what you're doing,
But you developed the respect of a lot of those guys that when another person wanted to be belligerent to you and not listen to you, they stood up for you, right?
Yeah. Well, because I had been fair to them.
Yeah.
So let's say a new inmate walks in, and the new inmate always tries to muss things up, But if you have lifers on your bus or people that are going through a trial that have been coming back and forth with you, you get to know them. Hey, deputy such and such. Hey, inmate such and such, or whatever. Like you get somewhat of a rapport. You're not sitting down having coffee with them or anything, but you get to know who they are, and they appreciate that, especially when they're incarcerated, because not getting their cigarettes taken away or getting to listen to their favorite station. They may seem like small things, but it makes it a little more comfortable for them. So they appreciate it. And so, yeah, somebody new would come on and they'd start disrespecting right away. And they'd be like, "Deputy, you want me to take care of him? I'll take care of him for you." I'm like, "No, just, you tell him to up, but don't do anything. I didn't want somebody to get shanked on my behalf or something, It's like, it's not worth it."
Got it. All right. So at some point you start going on patrol. Okay. So let me ask you some questions before you get on patrol. How old are you as you're heading out on patrol?
Those are hard questions. I don't remember.
Okay.
I'm terrible with dates.
Okay, well,
And I'm terrible with the ages I was, but I know that it was in the 90s.
94, 94 was about patrol.
94-ish, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So are you afraid? When you're starting on patrol, are you worried about your own well-being?
Yeah. I mean,
Okay.
if you're not safe.
Okay. Two-man patrolmen, one-man patrol cars at that point?
Well,
I mean, after you get off the
after you
FTO
get
from,
off training,
yeah, is it one man or two man?
it's one-man units most of
Okay,
the time.
okay.
There's a couple king cars, but most of them are one man. There's two car. It just varied on the shift and like who was available to work.
What's a typical call for you at that point on patrol? If you have one.
Well, there was a lot of domestic violence
Okay.
going on in the station that I worked. So there were a lot of domestic violence calls and stuff. And this was after OJ Simpson.
Mhm.
A lot of laws had changed about handling domestic violence too. So, which was good because, you know, good and bad, because sometimes it'd be reverse and, you know, the female should have been gone to jail, but she didn't end up going to jail. But so there were a lot of domestic violence calls. There's a lot of gang activity out in the early 90s out in the area I worked. There was
Okay.
quite a bit of gangs, yeah. Hispanic and Asian gangs.
Do you feel as a female out on patrol, were you able to use your verbal skills in a way to kind of talk down situations that maybe your male officer counterparts weren't able to?
Yes. Yeah, I do feel like I had an advantage that way.
Okay.
Well, first of all, I didn't want to put my hands on them because most of them were stinky, you know. I don't know. I just don't want to get in a fight. I don't want to get hurt. And I didn't want to be that girl. The one that thought that she was a man. She's tough.
Mm-hmm.
She's going to prove to everybody how tough she is. I mean, ask my training officers. I used to put potpourri in the doors of the patrol car. He had no clue for a longest time. I had a special compartment in my baton for my lip gloss. You know, I'm a girl and I liked being a girl. You know what I'm saying? It was just part of my thing. And I always told myself I didn't want to become jaded by this job either.
Mm-hmm.
So I made it very clear for myself to set boundaries to make sure that when I went to work, I was in my uniform. I might go in with, you know, my hair all done and my lipstick all on and everything. And then I would change into my uniform. And then when I was done, I didn't care how tired I was. I'm not going home in those ugly green pants and my t-shirt like most of the other ones. I'm getting back in my sundress. I don't care if I'm exhausted. I'm taking my hair down and I'm leaving. Because that way, it was my way of leaving that there, separating myself.
Yeah.
And mind you, I was married to another officer and we had to eat, live, and breathe the department for the time just because he always thought he was going to be thought he was my training officer at home and in the car and at 7-Eleven, and everything was a tactical move. So I couldn't take it. It was too much. Let's pretend we were following a car. You need to put out the call. I'm off right now. I'm 8 months pregnant. I don't think I'm going to be. You know, so that, what was the question? Because I think I got away from it a little bit.
Doesn't matter. I think you answered my question, and I had a follow-up question for you. It was basically the verbal skills that in the how. But here's my question for you as well. So when you were dealing with, for lack of a better term, bad guys out on the street, did you ever feel like you were cut a break? Not necessarily just because of your verbal skills, but because you were female. Do you think these bad guys said, okay, maybe I'm going to handle this situation a little bit different because I'm dealing with a female officer?
Sometimes. But sometimes it worked against me.
Yeah.
But just the sight of seeing a female, because it depended on the type of call.
Yeah.
And just some had no respect for police, even back then. And some had no respect for females, whether it was because of their background or not. But I always wanted to make sure that me being a female, out on patrol in a dangerous situation didn't make the situation worse for my partners. That's why I didn't want to act like I was a dude and get my partner in a fight.
Yeah.
Because I would hear that a lot. I would hear, oh, well, such and such mouthed off to this guy. And I'd be like, now they're IOD and, maybe they're not going to be coming back because that other female decided to be cocky because maybe she had a big, strong partner or whatever, or she wanted to act tough or think that acting tough with a suspect is going to make you get respect. You're not going to get respect. I mean, the people don't know you. You got to show them some respect a little bit before they even try to listen to you. You got to hear them out.
So that's a really interesting perspective because I haven't heard that yet. And that's very interesting.
Yeah, I always felt like if you look somebody in the eye and you talk to them and you make them feel heard, the first 5 minutes of letting them feel heard changes the whole dynamic. Because then they're like, okay, she's not profiling this whole situation. Maybe I'm not going to jail. And maybe he did. I mean, most of them probably still did. But just their side of the story getting heard for that short period of time before I, throw the cuffs on them and yell back at them or whatever. If I make them feel heard and that I have eye contact with them, I think it does two things. It makes them feel less intimidated. I'm not a man, so it's not like toe for toe, no machismo there. And they can associate me more with someone else in their family who happens to be female, whether it's their sister or their mother or their, someone else in their family listening to them instead of just, barking orders at them. Of course, in the beginning, you might have to bark orders to separate the two or to do whatever you have to do. But I always felt that worked for me. Yeah.
Can you tell a story about finishing up your FTO program and Beanbag almost having to shoot somebody or not shooting somebody?
Oh, yeah. So I was on training and it was the 23rd of December. I remember it was, just before Christmas. And I was working, I must have been working early mornings. And a call comes out that a disturbance comes out that someone is yelling and screaming and running up and down this hillside full of ivy or whatever. And they're disturbing all the neighbors. It's 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. And they're yelling this is when AIDS was first out and it was, coming out that AIDS was, and stuff. They were yelling HIV, PCP, LAPD. They're yelling all this stuff and they're acting really crazy. So my partner and I get there and we're the only unit there. We're a 2-man unit because I'm on training still. And so we stop and we make demands for him to come down, off the hillside and to talk to us, whatever. And he's not listening. He's running back up the hill. Then he kind of comes charging at us. He jumps on the hood of the patrol car and he dents the car and he breaks the light. I mean, it's a strong kid. He's probably maybe 21, 22 in hindsight. He's big Caucasian kid, and he's not listening to anything. And it's obvious that he's under the influence of something, but he had to be at least 6'3", like a big football player kid. And he's just out of his mind. And so we keep making the commands and stuff. And at that time, I'm scared. I mean, we're, I'm making demands and stuff, and I'm just envisioning him. And my partner is great TO, but not a very big guy either. And so we communicate and decide to get they had just come out with I don't know if they just come out, but they were putting the beanbag rounds now in the trunk of the car, in the shotgun in the trunk of the car. So he distracts him. I go to the trunk of the car. I get the shotgun with the beanbag round in it. And so I holster my weapon because I'm thinking he's just gonna overpower me, take my weapon and kill me. And I'm thinking I'm gonna have to kill this kid. I'm really focused on, I'm thinking I'm gonna have to do a headshot. This guy's so big, he comes close to me. I don't have no choice. I'm gonna have to kill this kid. So I get the shotgun out of the trunk of the car and I take a couple steps back and I rack around in it And I'm giving him commands. I'm gonna have to shoot you. I'm gonna have to shoot you. He doesn't know that it's a beanbag round. He thinks it's a real shotgun for all I know, right? How would he know? So I do. I shoot him, and it hits the center mass. And he kind of like, because it takes your wind out of you. Those things are, like a hematoma, like huge. And so it kind of pauses him. It doesn't completely stop him. He starts to go down onto the ground. By that time, other units are arriving and stuff like that. But then he pops back up again. So I'm like, rack another round in. And this time I tell him, I'm going for the jewels. I'm going down low. I just scream out all these profanities on where I'm going to shoot him. Because I don't want to have to shoot him again. I want this to be over. Everybody go home safe. So anyway, something gets through to him. Maybe he was talking about his junk, but I don't know. And he gets down and we get him cuffed and everything. And we take him to Whittier Hospital. And so I'm sitting there with him and his family, his parents arrive or his relatives, whatever he was. Oh my goodness. This kid, I could not get over telling this kid, I almost killed you. He was the nicest kid. He had come to Los Angeles to go to some parties for the holidays, was visiting some relatives. Someone gave him some kind of drugs, a window pane or something, and a piece of gum. He didn't even know. He didn't take it willingly. And he ends up whacked out of his mind. And I'm thankful that we had an alternative at that point.
Yeah.
Because I would have killed this kid. And I would have had to live with that.
Yeah.
And I don't think the general public, I'm glad that happened in the beginning of my career, because when you go through the academy, I've always been a really good shot. And I've just always thought, if somebody's coming at me, I'm probably going to have to shoot them in the head, because they're a big person and they're coming at me. And if I really feel that serious, and I really felt that serious, that he was going to get me and get my gun. But I was blown away that it happened. Everything was the perfect, scenario came out. The kid had a big lump in the center of his chest. His parents came out, or his relatives came down to the hospital and stuff, and they were like apologetic, and they're offering to pay for the patrol car. It was just, I was like overwhelmed with how happy I was that I didn't have to kill him.
Yeah. All right, so eventually you become a detective.
Yes.
Is that always your goal? When you first start, is that always the goal, to become a detective?
Yes.
Okay.
I always wanted to be a detective.
Okay, so you start working assault, and then eventually you get to major crimes where you're working kidnapping, murder for hire, fugitive, stuff like that. Is there a specific case, or not a specific case, and we'll talk about a case, but is there specific investigations? Are there investigations that you liked doing more than others?
At Metro, major crimes, they're all, most of them are pretty good cases, except for because we handled the escapes too, which also included the ankle bracelet people.
Okay.
And those, it's kind of like.
Maybe this. Was there a specialty that you developed in any of these cases? Or no, you were pretty much jack of all trades. You could do them all.
Well, our unit handled all the kidnappings, the murder for hire cases, celebrity stalking cases, escapes from the county jail, fugitives, and extradition. So we got to travel all over the United States and bring back fugitives or extraditions and stuff. My partner and I got assigned a few kidnappings that were pretty good cases. Sometimes they're bogus, because it's like, somebody pays a coyote to bring somebody over the border, and then the aunt confesses that it was all, arranged, and you're like, really, all those hours of time and everything, and you can't even do anything. And they knew their daughter was really safe, and they put you through hell because you're worried that they're, getting harmed and stuff. So, it was sprinkled with so many different cases, with so much murder for hire cases. We had quite a few of those.
How about, can you talk about the Dr. Doolittle case?
Yeah, there was an inmate, and I had just pulled up to major crimes. I hadn't been there that long, maybe a year. And he walked out of the Twin Towers, just walked out. He went to court. I think it was, I don't remember what court, I think it was Van Nuys Court. And he kept his regular clothes underneath his orange jumpsuit. They didn't get the clothes back.
Because he was representing himself, right?
Yeah. And him and another inmate, they had a newspaper and they cut out a picture of Eddie Murphy, Dr. Doolittle too, right? Made himself a little name badge. Got back to Twin Towers. I don't know exactly the whole route and everything he took. All I know is that he took off the orange jumpsuit and walked out like the employee exit or entrance. And working major crimes, that is a case that we would handle. So my partner and I, we got notified. I mean, I don't know. It's all subjective. I don't know if we had gotten notified a little bit earlier, we would have found him like that first night because we went exactly where he had been that night. I know this because we gave him a hard time when we did get him back in custody, which was like 16 days, 15 hours, and 29 seconds. I don't remember. I did not sleep that whole time. This guy was pulling shenanigans. He was going to turn himself into that weatherman, that Nance, whatever his name was. There was a weather guy. Yeah, I remember because he'd already been out for quite a bit of time. And the sheriff at the time gave us every resource to get this guy back in custody, which did help with the pressure that was on us. Yeah. We had everything at our disposal. Me and my partner had the handle on this case. And they gave us everything. They gave us arrow units. They gave us every other detective unit and everything. And we searched. We were all the way in Vegas. We were all the way in Riverside. We were everywhere. And we had those dogs, the bloodhound dogs. Mm-hmm. Oh my God, I had no idea how good those dogs are. Because after we got them in custody, because at first I was like, yeah, right. Sure, he sat on that park bench. Yeah, sure, he got over here. Sure, he went in that phone booth. And when I talked to him, he'd been there. But it took us a while. And then the day he was caught, we had caught wind that he was with downtown LA in this homeless area or whatever. And LAPD snatches him at the last second and takes the credit. But during that first place we went to try to get him in custody, he went to his girlfriend's house. And he spent a nice evening with her, painted her toenails and all this stuff. So when we got him in custody, we were like, yeah, we know you painted, we gave him a hard time when in the interview when we got him back in custody about painting her toenails and stuff. And yeah, that was a good case. It was a really good case. It was exhausting. I remember being so tired. Yeah. Because I didn't sleep like that whole time. And that one night that he's going to give himself up because his sister, supposedly he had stopped by his sister's house and his sister called because she didn't want him to get shot. So she thought that he would relinquish himself to this weatherman named Nance. Gosh, escapes me. And so, I mean, the sheriff came back into town from vacation for this. I went home. I lived way out east, and I had ordered to go home and get some sleep. I get home, I take a shower, I lay my head on the pillow. I get the call that he's going to turn himself in. I need to get back to work. I need to get to, I don't even remember what the city was, Westminster or something. I don't remember what it was. Yeah, so that didn't happen. He didn't turn himself in. But yeah, that was a roller coaster of a ride.
Now, eventually you get forced to retire because of injuries. Is that because of one specific incident or just because the job has just taken a toll on your body?
Well, kind of both. I got injured actually really early on by working transportation. I took a fall while walking a line of inmates at LCMC, which is the old hospital.
Mm-hmm.
So they have like these tunnels that you go beneath, and my partner and I are walking a line of inmates, and you walk past the morgue and stuff. Where back then you walk past the morgue and the floor is like slippery and gross and stuff. And I'm walking, and I have a line of inmates, and I have a handful of chains, and all of a sudden I slip. You know, like those toys that you see sometimes, and you push the bottom, and the thing goes down and then pops back up again.
Yeah.
That was me. Because I have this line of inmates. I'm at the front of the line, and I have this line of inmates, and I slip into a box. It was a box full of toilet paper, but there was one roll of toilet paper in there, and it did not cushion anything. I fall backwards. I hit my head on the wall, and I'm in this box. But I mean, I'm like, I just jump back up again because there's no time to feel any pain. There's no time to do anything because I'm afraid that, I mean, I'm still on probation.
Yeah.
It's within my first year of being on the sheriff's department. So first of all, I'm not going to complain too much because I don't want to get rolled up. I just got this job, you know? But I did tell them about it, and they did send me to their doctors, and they did x-rays, but the x-rays didn't show anything. But I think that was the beginning of the main injury, because I have 4 blown discs in my neck. I have 3 in my lower back. And throughout the years, there was car accidents, there were some scuffles, you know, in patrol. There were some, you know, foot pursuits where, you know, when I was working as a detective, and you know, high heel boots are not the best to run after suspect or climb over walls. I'm not one of Charlie's Angels, so. But yeah, so it was kind of like continuous trauma leading up to my retirement, but I did not want to leave it. I did not want to leave the job. I loved being a deputy sheriff. I loved being at major crimes. I loved being a detective. I mean, my goal was to retire as a lieutenant. That's what I always thought I wanted to do. But I mean, even taking the sergeant's exam, I didn't do the second part of it. I really loved being a detective at major crimes, but they didn't give me a choice because, you know, the county doctors with my injuries, if I got injured again, I could have been, you know, handicapped, and I was going through a divorce and stuff. And I just thought, I have to be able to provide for my daughter. So I need something to hold me over until, you know, I could start my career again and find some other avenue of business.
Yeah. So last 2 questions that I always ask
Okay.
kind of corresponds with what you're just talking about a little bit, but did law enforcement affect your family?
Yes and no. I think it affected my family because of the person that I was married to, who was also in law enforcement, and the type of person that the job kind of, I don't know, turns you into, or like makes you think like. It was a lot of stress. It was a lot of stress, but it wasn't just because of the sheriff's department. I mean, who knows? I mean, I don't know if it would have, if I wasn't in law enforcement and they were still in law enforcement, if it would have worked. I don't think so.
But let me ask you this. Do you think you could have been married to a person that wasn't in law enforcement?
In hindsight, yes.
Okay.
Back then, no. Back then, it did feel like nobody's going to understand. Or you're going to get home, you're going to go, I had a 245, you know, blah, 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 blah. And people are going to go like, what? And what did they do? And you're going to have to explain the whole thing. Well, that means that this person entered the house with the intent to do, you know, like, it just seemed like a lot to be able to try to explain stuff to a layman that, you know, would be easier for someone who was, so I understand why people end up with other officers. But
how about your kid though? Any residual effect from?
Well, she's very cautious. She's always like, because being raised by 2 people that were both in law enforcement. But we got divorced when she was pretty young, and then and I got retired when she was still on the younger side. She has an appreciation for suspicion, though. She's, you know, alert of her surroundings. She's, you know, I remember when the Uber thing first came out, and I'm like, she's like, Mom, first of all, I will not sit in the back seat where they have child locks. I take a picture of the license plate. All these things she does,
Yeah,
just to take an Uber, where most kids are just like, oh, just get in any car with anybody. So it made me feel better that she was alert. You know, she has a gun of her own. She has like, she knows how to shoot it. She knows how to protect herself. So those things were good. It does make them a little more skeptical of things though, but I think she turned out pretty damn good.
Okay, and that goes into my last question. So obviously your daughter's very cautious. How did being in law enforcement affect you in your view of people in society?
Well, because I worked a lot of crime prevention and stuff too, and I did a lot of events for the sheriff's department. I kind of had a knack for that. I did started a mentorship program with the kids and the horses when I was at patrol station and stuff. I was always looking for the hope in somebody. I was always looking for the goodness in people. I don't know why, because as a child, I was surrounded by stuff that wasn't good, but I don't know. I just never wanted to give up on that. I think that something as simple as changing out of my uniform before I went home and trying to leave that there, making a cautious effort not to become jaded. Because I had seen other males and females, retired or still on the job, that were, yeah, not. And now I own a wedding venue and I own an event planning company, and I can't afford to be. I don't even hardly ever watch the news because from now on it's rainbows and unicorns. Just telling you, I have to be lighthearted. I can't be that person. I find myself sometimes though, and it's come in handy. That sixth sense about a client or a guest at an event, can really come in handy. I mean, I had to call 911 not too long ago at the wedding venue, but other than that, I'm pretty good at like spotting what's going on. And it makes me really good at the job I have now, or the career that I chose, because you're planning an event, you're filing a case, you're looking forward all the time. You're always looking at like what can go wrong. But I think it made me more well-rounded.
Do you think that your view and kind of like, for example, you're talking about, hey, I'm able to kind of sense things. How much of that do you think is being a police officer, being a detective? Is there any percentage in there that has the being a woman's intuition?
Oh yeah. I think it's probably 50-50.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I think well, having the intuition and listening to intuition are two different things.
Right.
Because we're all born with intuition, but if you don't listen to it, it ain't worth shit. Right?
Right.
As you get older, it's like, oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And, sometimes my husband or my employees will be like, well, why are you, this is what we're going to do. And they're like, but just trust me. And then when it's all said and done and we didn't book that person, or we did book that person, but we paid an eye on this person, they're like, how did you know? I'm like, just don't question it, because I've learned not to stop questioning it, because it's kept me out of danger. And,
Yeah.
that, and listening to, a higher power. I remember when I was in patrol and I'd get scared and be hunched behind a car or whatever. Because I was so small, they would hoist me through the windows at the, a warehouse or whatever, because I was tiny. So I get, in there to start the search or whatever. And I mean, you're scared out of your mind. You can't see anything, whatever. And I would always say, this was a Bible verse that I would say all the time. And Joshua 9 was my Bible verse. But be strong and of a good courage. Be not afraid, for Lord thy God is with thee. Whereversoever thy goeth. I'd say that over and over and over again. Yeah. And so, yeah. That intuition kept me alive.
Susie, thank you for the interview. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome.